1. I will start by telling you I've never discussed this with anyone other than my fiancé until today. I'm not looking for jokes or silliness or accusations of fictionalized reports. This is my experience, and I would like to find out more. Several years ago, while out of town in a nice little hotel in central Washington, I was laying in bed and a large figure appeared in the middle of the room. Seemed to materialize instantly. The man was every bit as tall as the ceiling, and unbelievably wide across the shoulders. He appeared to be wearing a trench coat, and his face seemed to be pointed to the floor and obscured by a tall collar that was flipped up, and a hat that did not seem modern. As strange as this was, I was not startled or particularly afraid for some reason I still don't understand. I did not sense malice, and I did not fear for my safety. He did not move, and he just stood there, massive and silent, for about a minute, and then seemed to disappear within a blink. I have seen this figure several times now, throughout the years, and it is always while I am laying in bed, and always in total silence, no TV, no phone. The figure always appears to be the same size, build, and dress. I have never discussed it with anyone until a few weeks ago. I moved in with my fiancée several years ago, and out of the blue, she started sleeping with the door open and the hall light on. This was new behavior, and I questioned her several times about it. She was reluctant to discuss it. A couple weeks ago, I asked if we could close the door or turn the hall light off, and she said no. Again, I asked her what she was afraid of. I kinda teased her about the boogeyman, and I told her, I will kick his ass if the boogeyman tries to get you. She said, I don't think so, he's a big dude. This triggered my memory of the figure I have seen a few times over the years, and she finally opened up and told me what had freaked her out. She described the figure I have seen most exactly as I described it to you. While I was scanning one of my work-related memes groups on Facebook, the conversation somehow turned to shadow people. I think it is time to find out how many people share similar experiences. I appreciate any feedback I get here. Jabez. 2. Former Air Force here, first duty station in Okinawa, Japan. Young, dumb, and fresh and married, my new hubby and I moved out of the single airman dorms and into our own home. The wait for on-base housing was a year or more, so we got a house in one of the many surrounding communities. The place had a creep vibe from the start, but pickings were slim. It was a refurbished 2-story, 3-bedroom, balconies, wood floors location. Seemingly nothing wrong, but the feeling of being watched in the master bedroom was constant. I kept getting an image of an old Okinawan man, not angry or malicious, but definitely a peeping damn Tom. Maybe I have mild schizophrenia, but that wouldn't explain the shared experience at location 2, the top of the stairs. You know how it feels to have a raging bully squaring off at you. This energy at the top of the stairs was exactly the same. Overwhelming malevolence. Taking that first step in the morning very quickly became a daily traumatic experience. Both my husband and I experienced its violent punch in the gut at the top of the stairs any time we headed up. It felt like a very sudden physical blow, always on the solar plexus. It was enough to cause one to jolt and double over, usually teetering dangerously at the edge, wondering WTF just happened. Descent on the steep, narrow stairs was just as bad. We had to brace ourselves and grip the handrail tight. Otherwise, the invisible bastard took full advantage of your lack of attention and shoved you back at that precarious foot-dangling moment when you left the top but before you've reached the first step. I felt the contact with my back, though nothing physical was ever there. Lurching forward and catching myself on the wall or rail was the norm. Daytime, nighttime, didn't matter. And it didn't roam the house, unlike the other cast of characters floating through. This angry asshole stayed put right on the small landing at the top of the stairs. My husband, less empathic than I, felt the solar plexus blows, but not the back shoves. Which was amazing to me, because every morning without fail he fell noisily down the stairs, cussing me out the whole way because I made the stairs slippery by cleaning. Ah! A few weeks in and doubling over yet another jarring blow at the top of the stairs, I'd had enough. This goddamn thing was trying to kill us. Quit it, I yelled, accompanied with my own blast. He started backing off after that, the blows lighter and less frequent, more like nudges. Just enough so we knew he was still there. Lesson learned, stand up for yourself. Got used to both, but sure am glad to be in a spirit-free house now. 3. This took place in 2011. I had met Steve on New Year's Eve when he spilled beer on my shoe while dancing. We started vibing and we really hit it off, so soon after we started dating. I had just started to sleep at his place sometimes. He lived in an older place. It was once a duplex, but it was now split into 4 separate units for singles. I don't remember feeling strange about anything before the night terrors came back. I used to have them when I was really young, and intermittently I would get them at stressful times in my life. But this wasn't a stressful time. It was a really fun, carefree time, so it didn't make sense. They came with a sense that I was living someone else's memories in the dream. I would get sleep paralysis, and he would hear me struggling, trying to move or scream, and he'd wake me up. The dreams were very violent. I remember seeing a lot of blood, and I would wake up feeling violated, knowing that something bad had happened there. The fear didn't go away when I woke up. It stuck with the house, and I often needed Steve to talk me down, or sometimes we'd even go get pancakes at our favorite diner in the middle of the night. It was one of these mornings I had awoken from a nightmare, and I was fully awake, but meditating. I had a vision. The impression was of a slight older man sitting at the foot of the bed, with his head in his hands. I looked closer to see more detail in his face. He has the saddest blue eyes. I instantly knew this man did something horrible in this place. I went on with my day, but that man stayed with me, his piercing blue eyes, and his brutality haunted me. I went to school, but I couldn't concentrate as I sat in class with my laptop, so I googled rape murder Lake Worth apartment. Something told me to Google those exact words in that order. At this point, I wasn't sure of Steve's exact address. The very first article was what I needed. It was about a woman who had got home from her waitressing job at night, and she was attacked right outside her home and dragged by the hair inside, where she was sexually assaulted and murdered. She screamed. Nobody called the police. When I saw the address, my jaw dropped. I texted Steve to confirm his exact address, and there it is on the computer screen. I continued to read. This was a crime that occurred in the 80s, but the man had just confessed in 2011, which is why it was new, I guess. He was already in jail on another crime, and he copped to this one. His mugshot was in the article. There were those blue eyes, staring right through me in that creepy way that gave me full body chills. I instantly recognized him from my vision that morning. The waitress ended up dying at the exact age that I was back then. Maybe this is one reason I kept dreaming about what happened to her. Another reason it might have imprinted so heavily is that no one heard her screams. There was just a feeling of helplessness. And when I think of these 3 surrounding neighbors not getting involved, they all share walls which are papered thin there. We could hear everything. It felt like maybe that was all she wanted, to be heard. I wish I could say it resolved itself, but I did a lot of smudging and cleansing in that place, and it still creeped me out being there alone at night. 4. We first moved into this house when I was around 9 or 10 years old, and I've recently moved out. My parents still live there and occasionally tell me about weird stuff still happening. I'll start at the beginning, but some of this stuff happened almost 10 years ago, so bear with me. I have 2 sisters, and when we moved in, we all raced around the house, looking at rooms and such. There was 3 rooms on the 3rd floor. One of them had a cupboard that we all hated. I made our dad stick something in front of it before we'd go in there. I think he stuck a storage cabinet there for a while, but that's gone now. The second room was a bedroom that we only used for sleepovers at first. We all hated being up there alone, and I can remember crying while cleaning up after a sleepover up there on my own in the middle of the day. That room in particular still scares the shit out of me, but to keep things clear, we'll call that the haunted room. All three of us kids ended up sleeping in the bedroom under the haunted room at some point, and while my two sisters both told me that they saw a man at the end of the bed during the night, when I moved into that room I didn't see anything. I did once wake up, sort of, fully conscious with my eyes closed, and was listening to what I thought was my younger cousin or niece running around upstairs just in circles above my room. This was a few years after we'd moved in and my first major paranormal event in the house. I opened my eyes, but it was still nighttime. I looked at the clock, and I think it was around 2 a.m. The weird thing is, as soon as I opened my eyes, the noise stopped immediately. There's probably an explanation for this, like sleep paralysis of some kind. I could move freely, even before I opened my eyes. This was around 4 years ago, when I was 15 or 16. I moved to the top bedroom a few months later, next to the haunted room, and turned said room into a living room for me. I hated that room, and I hated playing video games in there, so eventually I moved my consoles into my bedroom and just stopped going into the haunted room. I can't remember any more weird experiences in that room, except when I was upstairs on the stairway up to the top floor and the hall area before the room. I would always feel watched, and it would feel very uncomfortable, like someone was angry at me. I never walked up there in the dark, but would walk freely around the rest of the house in the dark. The only other thing there was, I had constant nightmares about the haunted room. I'd have multiple a month, but not every night, maybe 5 a month. In these dreams I'd be in the haunted room and doing something. Activities and age ranges vary. Sometimes I'm 9 and playing hide-and-seek with my sisters, or sometimes 15 playing video games. And the exact same thing happens every time. The door slams shut and I can't get out. It's not locked. I always check the lock. But something's holding it closed, and that uncomfortable feeling I get upstairs hits me hard. I know something is there, and it wants me gone, but it also won't let me go. I always know it's the haunted room, but it sometimes varies in weird ways, like the roof is lower, or there's a doorway in the middle of the room. These dreams were the worst part of living there. No contest. Since moving out, I don't get these dreams anymore, and I'm happy in my new house. But sometimes I go watch the house while my parents are away, and those awful dreams return, along with that same feeling while I'm awake, but stronger now. 5. Many people may be familiar with the concept of astral travel. Supposedly, this is the ability to separate one's astral body. The only other way I think to express it is the soul, from one's body, so that the soul can take spirit journeys to other realms, while one's body is left safely at home. Shamans in many human cultures throughout history have presumably trained themselves to take such journeys regularly, in order to gain occult knowledge or insight about the future and a person's health, or perhaps to take a peek at other dimensions. There also have been reports of spontaneous astral travel, where the event just happens to a person without their conscious control. People who experience near-death experiences often report their souls rising up, looking down and seeing their bodies lying below them. I once had no opinions about astral travel one way or another. I neither believed nor disbelieved in it. I simply didn't know. Then an experience happened to me one night. It started out much like any other night, except that I felt more tired than usual, and I decided to retire early. I recall it was a lovely winter night, very close to the Yuletide, and a gentle snow was falling outside. I snuggled down in bed to listen to a favorite YouTube channel, preparing myself for sleep. I felt very comfortable and was just drifting off, when I felt an unaccustomed lifting, sense of weightlessness. I felt as though I were floating and suspended in air, rather than sinking into the oblivion of unconsciousness as usual, and that my consciousness had shifted. I was hyper-alert, more even than when in a waking state. I opened my eyes and lo and behold, I find myself floating near the ceiling, looking down at my inert body, peacefully lying in bed, faintly illuminated by the glow of my laptop screen. I marveled at this situation. I had not sought this. I had not expected it. It was just happening without any effort on my part. Oddly, I felt no fear, none at all. I just assumed that I was dreaming. Was this what people call a lucid dream? Is so-called astral travel and so-called lucid dreaming one and the same? I had no idea. I just found myself, some part of myself, marveling at the experience. Two things I remember. Were the sense of weightlessness and lack of any physical discomfort. I felt buoyant and light and rather excited by it all. I also felt a strong desire to leave, to fly, to spread my wings, as it were. The nearby window beckoned me, and before I knew it, I was on the other side of it. Opening it had not been necessary. All I knew was that I was free. I didn't feel the coldness of winter air at all, but I was flying very swiftly through it, flying very swiftly indeed, as if with the power of a single thought. Soon I found myself above a vast dark ocean. The water looked very cold and unbroken as far as my eyes could see. Soon I reached land again and found myself in a town. It wasn't any town I was familiar with. The houses seemed strange. They looked old. They were all covered with the same wooden clapboard siding, stained deep brown and unpainted. All of these buildings were close together, attached, in fact, as townhouses are. Some of the buildings had 3 or 4 floors, others were lower, but they were all attached. I don't know why, but I got the impression I might be in a Scandinavian country, although I've never been to Scandinavia. The night was very dark and it seemed very cold, although I couldn't feel it, and flakes of snow were drifting about in the air. I found myself being drawn to one particular lighted window among this pile of buildings, one of the taller houses. Before I knew it, I was through this window and inside. It became immediately apparent that a big party was going on, a holiday party, as it was to Yule. There was much light, laughter, and chatting. People were moving about, sitting or standing, with drinks in their hands. They were all dressed very nicely. I specifically remember a tall, attractive blonde man, leaning against a counter that separated the wide entrance hall from an open-concept kitchen and living room area where many other people were. This man was wearing a lovely knitted jumper, a sweater. He was holding a drink and chatting with another man. I moved closer to these people, only to realize that they had no cognizance of me at all. I even waved a hand before their faces and they didn't react. Clearly I was entirely invisible to them. I was, in essence, a ghost. I didn't overly marvel at this interesting situation. I more or less accepted it and began moving from room to room, exploring the house. What amazed me more was how vivid everything seemed. I could discern every detail of my surroundings, the furnishings, the people, the activity, the sounds. I recall that one room was filled with toys. After making a circuit of the downstairs rooms, I came out once more into the wide entrance hall, which included a wide staircase of dark hardwood, balustraded with the same on both sides. The wood was rather scuffed and worn with age, but the whole house, although it was clearly older, was well appointed and comfortable. It had good vibes. 2 children sat on the stairs, a boy and a girl, looking between 8 and 10 years of age. They were chatting and playing happily, and also were dressed in their holiday best. The girl wore a bright red dress with lace trim. The boy wore blue slacks and a jumper. I approached them with the idea of moving beyond them, and hence up the stairway to explore the stairs. But at this point something rather shocking happened. The little girl looked up and suddenly her eyes focused right on me. Her eyes widened, her entire face filled with utter terror, and before I knew it, she emitted a piercing scream. This all happened so fast I remember thinking, "Do you mean that you actually see me?" Because all of the adults could not. For some reason, obviously, I was visible to this girl. In an instant, I felt myself being pulled back. It was rather like the sensation I imagine a telescope might feel when it is being retracted. The entire scene before me collapsed. I was back in bed, awake, with a voice from my laptop droning away next to me. This experience remains, for me, one of the most profound that I could perhaps label as paranormal, although it was very much different than most you hear about. Usually a narrator recalls an experience of seeing a ghost, often when they were a child. In this instance, it was I who was the ghost. It is perfectly natural, I suppose, for people to react with fear and shock when they suddenly see someone, or something, that shouldn't be there. I suspect I might just feel the same. But I wonder if every encounter of this sort need be seen as malevolent. Perhaps many so-called ghosts are merely what I was on that particular winter night. An unexpected soul traveler who finds themselves roaming in places just as strange to them as they may seem to the rare and gifted person capable of detecting their presence. Since this time I have begun a course of self-training, and today I am capable of taking astral or lucid soul journeys at will. I have been many places and met many interesting people on these journeys, and have gained much insight that I would call profound. But I have never encountered the little girl in the red dress again. My experiences thus far have shifted my former view of what I define as supernatural. Maybe someday such experiences will become perfectly natural. Maybe someday we will recognize ghosts as just fellow souls who, voluntarily or involuntarily, are having a go at parting some interdimensional curtain. And if we catch sight of someone peeking in at us, we can just wave and say, hello. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories. Number 179. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. There we go. I've been getting awful muddled up doing my outros recently. Okay, paranormal, so this should go up on Friday. You will have noticed from videos I'm going back to what I like to call classic Hellfreezer in terms of the thumbnails. Well, I say classic. Classic-ish. I'm starting to suspect that the more I change my thumbnails when my videos show up in people's feeds, they don't recognize them right away, so they just kind of get ignored. Could be wrong, but I think a lot of people, my thumbnails used to be quite unique in the way they looked, and there's a lot of effort that goes into them, but I think perhaps they're becoming a little generic. So we're going to try quasi-old school Hellfreezer for a while, and we'll see how that works. Certainly the colors and the text of the episode titles pops a lot more on the darker background. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up there for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.